Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the JANUS Contemporaries lineup. This is associated with JANUS Films and the Criterion Collection and the Criterion Channel. The Blu-ray lineup has been going strong for about a year or so, with a number of wonderful Blu-ray releases of contemporary titles from circa 2022-2023 and 2024, this year 2024 is no exception to this continuing lineup of really exciting releases. And so I'd like to focus our attention today on one such release from this year 2024, and this is a film from 2023, and this is a work which is from the filmmaker Nuri Bilge Ceylan. And the name of the work is, and please pardon me for my terrible pronunciation of the Turkish language, I hope you can forgive me, but the name of the work is Kuru Ultar Ustana, or as it's known in English, About Dry Grasses. This is the work from the filmmaker artist Nuri Bilge Ceylan, and this is co-written by Nuri Bilge Ceylan together with Ebru Ceylan and Akin Aksu. And this has a cast included in which are Deniz Ciciloglu and Merve Dizdar and Musab Ekşi and Ekse Bakshi and others. And this is the work. And once again, I'm very sorry for my terrible pronunciation of the Turkish language. I'm really sorry. I hope you can forgive me, but I will do my best. This is Kuru Ulta Ustane, or as it's known here in English, About Dry Grasses. So this is my first time to watch this work, About Dry Grasses. This is not my first film. I've seen a number of works by Ceylan, and I've been incredibly impressed and very deeply moved by them. Once Upon a Time in Anatolia, as it's known in English, comes to mind as one such example of this. But this is my first time to watch this very recent effort, again from the year 2023, About Dry Grasses. And so I really had no say specific context. I wasn't quite sure what to expect going in. I knew a little bit about the film just based on what I was able to read, very brief, but nothing beyond that. And so this was my first time to watch this, courtesy of this great JANUS Contemporaries Blu-ray, and it was very astounding and visually powerful, and it packs quite a punch, I must say. And there's a sense of a kind of class structure at play. There's also a sense of venom, betrayal. There's also a love story or a romantic. There's sort of what could be called a love triangle of sorts in terms of or a triangle of relationships with the main characters. This is Samet and Kenan and Nuray. This is Samet character, who is the Deniz Ciciloglu character, and then Kenan is the Musab Ekşi character, and they are teachers at the same school in a sort of rural area. This is in the eastern part of Turkey, that's my understanding, which is known as, in the region called Karayaza. And they also know another teacher in a school that's not the same school, but it's somewhat nearby. It's a little bit bigger school than the one that the two teachers here have. And this is the teacher Nuray, who was portrayed by Merve Dizdar. And so they form kind of triangular relationships and they are each, Kenan and Samet are in a way vying for the affections of Nuri in a series of meetings, maybe together, but also maybe separately. And then there might be some things that happen between say Samet and Nuri, and then also between Kenan and Nuri, that might spur in a kind of jealousy between the two friends and colleagues at this school, Kenan and Samet. So that is one very basically stated part of this work. But that's not all. There's also the goings on at the school, and in particular with the class and the classmates, and also the teacher-student relationships. And this also reveals something about the character of Samet and Kenan in particular as well, but perhaps most specifically Samet, as he is quite arguably our most prominent character in the film in terms of the running time. And our ability to get to know the characters. He appears most, I would say, in the film. And we come to realize that his relationship with his students and his place in this society, again, in this rural town in the eastern region of Turkey, the country, and also our understanding based on what Nuri Bilge Ceylan mentioned, say, in the great interview that's included with this JANUS Contemporaries release, that Samet, is from the western part of Turkey. He is here. He's almost feeling kind of isolated in this area, which is also presented visually in these wonderful shots of, say, the open ground and the snow and the distance that needs to be traversed physically, the walking distance between one point and the school, and the maybe the quiet moments of just taking a break between classes, but also being in one's teacher's office, as well as being in the classroom. So there's a sense of maybe Samet and others, but Samet in particular, being here as a teacher, but not quite knowing if this is his place. Maybe he feels out of sorts, out of touch. Maybe he wants to move on. He wants to be somewhere. He has maybe ambitions that go beyond this rural school teacher's life. And this is expressed maybe very subtly in some of the conversations that he has, for instance, with Kenan, his friend, and also his colleague. But things reach a kind of fever pitch fairly early on in the film. When one of his students, this is the young girl Sebin, she expresses a kind of a sort of an intellectual curiosity, and I think a very natural inclination for a sense of innocent precociousness. Being a young girl and also a student in Samet's class, or one of the students in Samet's class. And there is I think, a very genuine a sense of closeness between teacher and student here that we see certain glimpses of throughout the opening passages of the film, or the first act of the film, shall we say. But then we also see a kind of regime that is being enacted at the school, because the school is run under a set of rules and discipline. And there is a moment where the young girl's Sebin's bag is checked as part of a kind of maybe a routine check of bags to see if something has been, let's say, inappropriately taken without permission. And one of the things that is noticed in the bag of this young girl is a notebook. And the notebook also has within it what appears to be a love letter. Now, the love letter is something that the young girl obviously did not mean to have read or known beyond, say, herself and maybe someone else, but it's something that was very personal to her, that it becomes revealed out in the open. And the love letter apparently is the young girl's feelings towards her teacher, Samet. And again, this is a kind of feeling that the young girl had, or the young student had, towards a teacher who is very kind, and who's, during the opening moments or the opening act, again, he might feel out of place in a certain regard in this rural area of the school at Criterion, but he is also very friendly and very affable, and he seems to have a good rapport with the students. He's almost on a kind of same playing level, in a manner of speaking. You know, he almost prides himself on that, and he certainly does with this young girl, Sebim. But when this huge embarrassment occurs, and this kind of thing is really devastatingly embarrassing for the young girl, to the point that she is in tears, trying to essentially protect some of her, say, dignity and privacy after having been revealed in this sudden and quite embarrassing way, to the point where the teacher, Samet, also gets wind of the letter, and that the letter was written to him as a kind of love letter, because she has a crush on her teacher. And so, but through a series of, say, very subtle, yet maybe what one might call little white lies, or maybe misunderstandings, things snowball in this really sudden way, such that one day, Samet and Kenan, who are again the teachers at this rural school, or some of the teachers at the rural school, are summoned by their superiors, and they are told that some of their students have made accusations that the teachers have been inappropriate with some of the students. And so this shocks Samet and Kenan very much so, because they admit to not knowing, or they state that they don't know what is being referred to. The charges, or maybe the accusations that are revealed, seem to be somewhat amorphous or not quite clear. But what's known is that certain accusations have been made in terms of maybe inappropriate closeness with some of the students. And then we come to realize that one of the students who made one of the accusations is indeed the young girl, Sebim, with respect to her teacher, Samet. And so this sense of maybe not being sure of what's going on, as well as what the charges are against him, and a kind of feeling of a sort of authoritarian imposition that seems very much very much lacking in a sense of sort of due process and justice, as well as being something that Samet vehemently denies, and as well as being something that he can't really seem to control, really takes a psychological effect on Samet, such that we see him suddenly, or quite visibly, taking on a very negative character towards his students. I mean, before in the, as I say, in the opening act of the film, we saw him quite affable and very popular with his students. But then, with this seemingly sort of pangs of injustice that seem to be flung at him, he is taking it to the in a way that seems to further augment his feelings of isolation and wanting to leave this area. And there are some points of real devastating. Almost the curtain falls, and there are some moments where he's very devastating to his students because of the stress and the pressure, or perhaps because of the stress and the pressure of this apparent act of injustice against him. But because he claims that nothing inappropriate happened. And so he believes that this young girl is lying for whatever reason, and this in turn sours his view of this young girl, as well as souring his view of the students and just his position at the school. And so things turn quite ugly and quite mean, and we see a lot of revelation in terms of sort of his place as a kind of maybe cynical posture vis-a-vis class and class strata. I mean, there's a moment where the teacher breaks down in this almost horrific way, where he's almost being very derogatory towards the students in this rural area in eastern Turkey, essentially saying that they won't amount to anything. Even if they really work hard and study, they won't amount to anything above their lower class status. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what he's saying. So this is quite a devastating thing for a teacher to say to his students. But the point is that this film, through those types of passages, I think really is throwing into or the focus a kind of a cultural divide within, say, so maybe between East and West, and also rural and urban, and also class strata, in a kind of subtle way, with Samet at the kind of center of that proceeding, and then almost as a cynical spokesperson in a way for this. And he becomes even more cynical as the days and weeks pass, with this thing essentially hanging over him. And relationships that he felt were very positive seem to be breaking down. Now, while all this is going on, we have the triangular, the triangle of relationships with the Marvedizdar teacher from a neighboring area, different school, and the two men essentially competing for her affections in their own way. Now, we also get to know the character of Nuri and her very fascinating background. Also, perhaps due to what has happened to her in her life. She expresses when she was younger, she had a type of vitality that swayed her towards expressing her views politically, and a type of leftist progressive politics, and also demonstrations and the like, and almost a means by which, again, looking at her position, youth and culture, and this very earnest impulse to want to essentially change the world. And there's nothing wrong with that in the slightest. But she also experiences, or she explains how her feelings became very inward, and she essentially lost touch with that feeling because of some horrific act that had befallen her, causing her to incur a very serious injury to herself. And so she is living with this injury. The injury is still incredibly, it's casting a huge effect and influence upon her and her livelihood, and how she has to deal with everyday living. And it also means that she has become emotionally much more insular. And so we have this interesting setup of maybe insularly situated characters. Samet, the teacher who has been accused of inappropriate behavior, and that affecting a sense his level of ability to trust other people, and then also Nuri, who is also expressing this type of insular, almost isolation, and Kenan as well, who is subjected similarly to Samet. But then we have that mix of characters coming together now. Throughout these various plot threads, we see the possibility of a kind of clash of maybe political and worldview perspectives. It's interesting to see and hear how, for instance, Nuri views, say, the viewpoint of Samet, even as a kind of there's a sense of being cynical. There's also a sense of being insular, but there's also the difference between being insular and being cynical. One can be I think from Nuri's perspective, there is still a chance of a kind of earnest expression of what she believes or believed, whereas Samet may or may not hold that same kind of earnest hold on his own beliefs as he expresses them, or he might. Again, this type of, I think, psychological or philosophical discussion also takes place at some key moments of the film, which are themselves a means by which potentially characters might become, not just get to know each other, perhaps become willing to become more intimate with each other. Or at least that might be the case. Again, you'll have to watch the film About Dry Grasses to find out about that. Now, this along the way, we are, I think, while all these are happening, or as they are happening, or in the context of as these plot points are happening, and these character discussions are emerging and developing, we're also witness to incredibly breathtaking moments of the outdoor setting, again primarily located in this area of Kreza, an eastern part of the country, and I mentioned the snow and the nature, which is also captured in some montage moments of photos being taken of everyday people This is an interesting stylistic device that Ceylan and others employ here. As we are getting the story, and we get a sense that this is a kind of there is an interesting way in which this film might feel like it is sliding into this world of a quote unquote realistic depiction of sort of rural class setting in this part of Turkey, which might have temptations towards things that we've seen in terms of depicting the real in cinema. For example, for instance, in Italy, in Italian neorealism. And I think very tempting to look at this film about dry grasses in that way, and I think it's very possible to look at it in that way, in a certain respect. But what's so fascinating about Ceylan and others, what they do is they also turn the film and make it very stylistic and make it very constructed. Case in point, the way in which the photographs are taken, it's almost like the subject of the people it feels like it's a constructed image, the way that things are focused in it, and feels very different from the rest of the film, and that's fascinating. It gives a sense of, I don't want to say artificiality because I don't think that's quite it, but it gives a sense of a heightened reality. Which might be a great counterbalance to the sense of cynicism that we might detect in characters like Samet, or maybe the insularity, emotional insularity that we might detect in characters like Nuri, even as they try, maybe in vain, maybe not, to bridge those divides and maybe try to break out of those shells of cynicism and insularity, to maybe turn towards maybe a possibility of optimism and hopefulness. But my point is that these photographs, they seem to have this loving depiction of the people and the land. And so there's a sense of cynicism, but there's a sense of optimism as well, embedded within the very format of the film. So this is a fascinating choice. And then also there are some really striking moments that totally shatter the kind of, how should I say, the illusion of the cinema grammar that we might be used to. I'll just put it at that. There's a moment that I think will be so celebrated. It's already being celebrated, as I understand it, as being one of the most just surprising aspects or surprising moments in this film about dry grasses. But let me just say it took me by. I took a breath. I just caught myself and I heard myself. I was like that when the moment happened in this film about dry grasses. And so, because I was already absorbed in the grammar of the film, and then suddenly something happens that totally just put me off balance in a great way, and I was disoriented, and I had to take a breath, and then I came back into it. And it really transformed the experience into something that really reminded me of the act of sort of storytelling in cinema, which I thought was an incredibly bold choice on the part of Ceylan and others. So, Kuru Ultar Ustana, about dry grasses, and that title too, the grasses and the dry grasses, gains a lot of prominence in terms of the sort of approach to the younger generations in this rural setting, and whether or not they might be able to find some kind of emotional prosperity and economic prosperity based on a kind of a focus centering on their education, or maybe whether that's possible, or whether that is a fruitless endeavor because of the sort of the implied economic and social impediments that seem to be already in place, or maybe they are already in place. Who knows? Maybe it's these impediments that people like Nuri, especially when she was younger, were trying to fight against. But what about people like Kenan, or what about people like Samet? Will things ever change if people like Samet themselves are unable to change, or are unwilling to change? Or perhaps the opposite is true. Maybe they are able to change, and they are willing to change. And if that's the case, what does that say for not just their generation, but the younger generations as well? This is a truly breathtaking work. Again, I had no idea what was in store for me when I watched this film. And I was taken with the rhythms and the very methodical and very contemplative way in which a lot of the scenes were shot and a lot of the shots were composed. And there's a sense of a kind of repetition, which is also very soothing. And there's a sense of with the characters and their placement, which is also very soothing. And then there are the moments where, even in this visually soothing facade, things within the frame and people acting towards and against other people can be very psychologically shattering. And then the film, then, as I mentioned, takes these turns that are very bold and then also quite shattering in and of themselves. And I love that. I absolutely love that. There's much food for thought here. I was totally taken with this. The film is approximately 3 hours long. It felt like, for some people, maybe a 3 hour film might feel long, and for me, if it's a challenging film, or it's something that I find, due to maybe some fault in my part, if it's hard for me to engage with it, 3 hours can feel like a long time for me, depending on the film, but not for this one. About Dry Grasses, 3 hours went by just like that. It was really quite incredible. And then just some of the scenes where Ceylan adopts a photographer's eye, and the way that, say, snow sticks in the hair as someone's standing outside and a very light snow falls, they look into the camera, or some subtle thing like combing one's hair, or things like getting water at a nearby well, or maybe sitting in a car. I mean, these take on these huge emotional, resonant impulses, and they are heightened. It's the same thing about this film, having moments that feel like heightened reality, and then sometimes we are thrown into or drawn back into the world, and sometimes we are thrust out of it in this very purposeful way. And all the while, it's done on purpose in order to make us sort of fully realize maybe a sense of the true, even if one interprets this film as a kind of a shift or battle between the balance between cynicism and optimism. This idea of going back and forth in terms of the dimensionality of the film, that can, I think, affect one's view of this. Does it is it a statement on sort of the futility of this type of battle between optimism and cynicism? I mean, if a story ends just at a story, is there nothing more to be told in that way, or is it a kind of a universal reach that is possible? And again, depending on the outcome of the relationships between the characters, in particular the characters Kenan, Nuri, and Samet, we might be able to reach a more positive conclusion in terms of our reading or interpretation. That's my hunch. So. But again, I don't claim at all to be an expert when it comes to this film. I've seen it now 2 times. Yeah, that's 2 times, thanks to this Blu-ray. And I've loved every moment of it, very much so. This is a great one. This is the work which is, again, my apologies for the bad pronunciation, Kuru Ulta Ustane, or as it's known in English, About Dry Grasses. The Criterion Collection, or should I say the JANUS Contemporaries lineup, in association with JANUS Films and the Criterion Collection and the Criterion Channel, has released this film About Dry Grasses this year, 2024, as part of the JANUS Contemporaries lineup. On the back of the tin here, it says 2023, 198 minutes, 5.1 surround in Turkish with English subtitles, 2.39:1 aspect ratio. As customary with these recent films under the JANUS Contemporaries lineup, there isn't any information on the back or in the insert with regard to, say, the restoration or master, etc. So I won't talk too much about it here, although I must say that I'm very pleased with the way it looks and sounds. Given my own sort of setup in my home, it was a very captivating experience to watch. And that's due in part to the way it looked and sounds, courtesy of this home media release. But I have the disc in the machine right now, and this is a shot which is also mirrored in what's chosen for this cover art, which I think is also from the poster and some of the international releases, I believe. It's a key moment in the film, and we see 3 characters that are within the same frame, as it were. our three main characters. So that's something to consider. But also, as part of the Blu-ray, we have the movie, and then we have a second section here, which is called Meet the Filmmakers. You press that, and it'll go to a one-on-one conversation interview with the filmmaker. And here it's Nuri Bilge Ceylan. And this is approximately 14 minutes. Now, I have mentioned that I haven't seen all of Ceylan's films, but I've seen a number of them, and I think they are extraordinary. But my experience and my expertise when it comes to the works of Ceylan are very, very limited, and I'm very shallow when it comes to this. So this interview is very welcome from me, and I'm sure for many others. It's a great one. I hear Ceylan speaking in lovely, modest terms about his approach. He talks about how he's a passive observer of the world, which I find very, very, very fascinating to hear. And it's also perhaps suggestive of the sort of the photography motif that's also interwoven throughout many passages of this work about dry grasses. Speaking of the film, he talks too about how this was again co-written with Akin Aksu, and also who was also a past collaborator, an artistic collaborator with him, and then also his wife, Ceylan's wife, Ebru Ceylan, who's also a longtime collaborator, an artistic collaborator with Nuri Bilge Ceylan. And so in terms of Ebru's contribution in particular, Ceylan mentions Ebru Ceylan's contribution to the dialogue scenes and the written words here, and the structural elements. And then also Ceylan here mentions how this film about dry grasses was, in relative to his filmography, up there in terms of expensive budgets, at least for him and his films. And there is and also in terms of the shooting schedule and the like. Visual motifs are also things that Ceylan touches upon here, and he speaks about snow and how snow is very much for him evocative of his childhood. He is reminded of childhood memories, and you can see a lot of scenes in the snow, beautifully constructed scenes. And also the way that characters are walking in the snow. It's just that one lone figure in this huge mist of snow that you see a lot of those passages, in particular early on in the film, sort of setting oneself up as a viewer to kind of the majesty and also the sort of establishment of isolation, which Ceylan mentions here. That's also a key part of these sorts of scenes, because it then takes Ceylan to a discussion of, and this is things I have no idea about, so I learned so much about this, was that Samet is the teacher is from the western part of Turkey, and he's here kind of assigned to this job as a teacher in this rural part in eastern Turkey, Kurayaza, and so that might lead to him feeling quite out of place and out of touch and isolated. Thus, even in visual terms, we see him in a sense in the snow, isolated by the snow, as he mentions. And I like how he talks here about the way that his main characters, like Samet, are depicted here. We see all sides. They're not wholly good and not wholly bad. But we see pleasant sides to their character. We also see quite unpleasant sides to their character. And speaking of the plot development between him and Sevim, the young girl, one of his students, he mentions here, Ceylan mentions how it's a very small thing that he says that turns this whole issue. It just makes it snowball. And so had he not said it in this way, maybe things could have turned out different. But just those little things that can end up affecting us in a huge, huge way, result in big developments. And so this also leads to not just things that are quite grave, but also little things in terms of friendships and relationships. The small things also that are what count. And there are these moments of little white lies that occur. sprinkled throughout, that have huge ramifications to them. It's fascinating. There's also a moment, again, I don't want to go into too much detail. There's also a moment about the three of them, Nuri, Kenan, and Samet, arranging to meet, but it ends up happening that only two of them end up meeting. So, and it becomes a sort of a big part of, say, the second part of the film. So then how did that come about? And what about little white lies that occur, little things that might turn into big things? Also, the way that's constructed, there are long moments of sort of static, say, shots and much dialogue that is occurring. And as I say, there's a sense of a sort of serenity, which is really nicely counterbalanced with kind of internal turmoil that might be said to be happening during these dialogue scenes, which is utterly brilliant. So this is a great interview with one of the premier artists of sort of the current cinema age, Ceylan, Nuri Bilge Ceylan. And so I'm very happy. A number of his works are already becoming available on home media releases that I think themselves are very widely released. So it's wonderful to see that. And now About Dry Grasses is included in that. So I'm a big fan of. Now I'm a huge fan of this film, and this is further reason why Ceylan, for me, Ceylan is. It's one of the premier artists. So there is this discussion with Nuri Bilge Ceylan. It's approximately 14 minutes. Please check it out if you can. And then we have the insert, which is one of the simple fold-out inserts, but the essay by Michael Joshua Rowan called About Dry Grasses, Bitter Seeds. This is wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and it goes. I mean, for example, Michael Joshua Rowan describes the relationship between Nuri and Samet, and he describes it much better than I mean. I tried to describe it in my video here, but I was just going on and on and on. And I still couldn't find the right words for it. But here, the essay says it perfectly. I wish I could have said it like this. I didn't, but it says it like here. A certain scene capturing the director's own ambivalence as Samet's smug individualism battles with Nuri's unswerving commitment to social change. This is exactly it. This is exactly it. Oh my goodness, I wish I could have said it like that. I can't, but this is one of the reasons why I think the essays here for the JANUS Contemporary lineup by Rowan, this being the latest example, or one of the latest examples, is so crucial to check out. And there's again, he talks a little bit later in the essay about one of many surprises in this film. So I strongly urge you to watch the film first, and then after you've seen the film, you can read the essay, because it does, I think, assume that the reader has already seen the film. Yes. Fallibility also, and sort of the idea of kind of accepting one's fallibility, and I mean that across the board as part of maybe the ethos of this film, the artistic ethos of this film, I think is also very important. It's also touched upon wonderfully in the essay, so you've got to check it out if you can. But my dear friends, this is About Dry Grasses. I cannot state enough just how impressed I was and am with this. I think this is a great work. So great, so mysterious, and things are still somewhat hazy and somewhat there's a room for interpretation that invites more and more views and more watches. And as I say, the 3-hour plus running time, what is it, 198? So that's more than 3 hours, but that goes by so quickly, really does. It's breathtaking, it's intimate, it's very intense in places, it is experimental, it is also very much capturing a kind of realism or depiction of realism, and also hyper-realism, while telling these really compelling stories or parallel stories that are involving the same group, and also sort of social political concerns that can be taken as background context or as the forefront subject matter of this. So this is again, across the board, utterly brilliant. I love this film. I'm so glad it's here for to be able to watch. Another of my recent discoveries I'm very glad and very happy to have been able to make. This is the film by Nuri Bilge Ceylan, which is called in English About Dry Grasses. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great films, including About Dry Grasses, including other films by Nuri Bilge Ceylan, including other films in the JANUS Contemporaries lineup, including other films in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog, and also streaming services, and beyond. So until we see each other again, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.